The Valari had lived in peace for 3,000 years. Their world, Meridia, was a beautiful planet covered almost entirely by water. The Valari themselves were graceful beings who lived beneath the waves. They had soft blue skin and large dark eyes that could see in the deepest oceans. But what made them special was not their beauty. It was their kindness. The Valari were healers. Their medical technology was the most advanced in the entire galaxy. When plagues struck distant worlds, the Valari sent their doctors. When disasters destroyed hospitals, the Valari rebuilt them. They never asked for payment. They never demanded anything in return. For 3,000 years, they had been the heart of the Galactic Union, saving millions of lives across 40 different species. Taiho. Park was a human commander stationed on a small outpost at the edge of known space. He was a tall man, with tired eyes and steady hands. He had served in the Terran Defense Fleet for 15 years, and he had seen many things. But nothing prepared him for what he saw on his screen that morning. The emergency broadcast showed the Galactic Council in session. 850 representatives from across the galaxy sat in a massive circular chamber. At the center stood a Keth ambassador, a tall creature with gray skin and 4 arms. The Keth were known for their military strength and their hunger for power. They controlled an empire of 20 worlds, and they always wanted more. The Keth ambassador spoke in a cold voice. He accused the Valari of creating a biological weapon. He claimed they planned to use it against the Union. He showed documents and recordings as proof. But Taiho had worked with the Valari before. He knew their nature. The idea of them building a weapon was like saying water could burn, yet fear was a powerful thing. The council members looked at each other with worried eyes. The Keth had planted their lies well. Species that had been saved by Valari doctors now looked at them with suspicion. Friends became strangers in a matter of hours. The vote came quickly. 847 voted to expel the Valari from the Union. Only 3 voted. Against Earth. Luna Colony. Mars. Tejo watched as the decision was announced. The Valari ambassador, an elderly female with gentle eyes, stood alone in the chamber. She did not cry. She did not beg. She simply bowed her head and walked out in silence. 3,000 years of friendship, erased in a single afternoon. Within hours, everything changed. Trade ships that were heading to Meridia turned around. Ambassadors packed their bags and left. Communication channels went dark. A blockade of 12 Union patrol ships took position around the water planet. No one could enter. No one could leave. The Valari were cut off from the galaxy they had served for so long. On his small outpost, Taiho received a message from Earth Command. The face of Admiral Hannah Yoon appeared on his screen. She was an older woman with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen too many battles. But there was something different in her expression today. It was not anger. It was determination. "Commander Park," she said. "I assume you have seen the news." "Yes, Admiral." "I cannot believe what the Council has done." Admiral Yoon nodded slowly. "The accusations are false. Our intelligence has confirmed it. The Keth manufactured everything. They want Meridia's resources. The rare minerals beneath their oceans are worth more than 100 worlds." Taiho felt his hands tighten into fists. And the Council believed them? The Council chose to believe them. There is a difference. The Admiral paused. "Do you remember the plague of 2341, Commander?" Taiho remembered. Every human remembered. A disease had swept through Earth's colonies, killing millions. Human medicine could not stop it. Their doctors did not know what to do. They had called for help, but most species ignored them. Humanity was young. Humanity was unimportant, but the Valari came. They sent their best doctors and their most advanced medicine. They worked for 2 years without rest. They saved humanity when no one else would. And when it was over, they refused any payment. They simply smiled and said that helping others was its own reward. "I remember," Taiho said quietly. "Then you understand why we cannot abandon them now." Admiral Yoon leaned forward. "The Council has made their choice. Earth has made ours. We are sending a fleet to Meridia. We will break the blockade and stand with the Valari, no matter what comes next." Taiho felt something stir in his chest. It was pride. It was hope. What are your orders, Admiral? Prepare your outposts for possible conflict, and spread the word to any human vessels in your sector. We need every ship we can get. The screen went dark. Taiho sat alone in his small office, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, an innocent species was being punished for crimes they did not commit. The galaxy had turned its back on them, but humanity would not. He thought about the Valari doctors who had saved his grandmother during the plague. He thought about the stories his mother told him about their kindness. He thought about what it meant to be human in a galaxy that often seemed cold and cruel. Perhaps they were young. Perhaps they were small. Perhaps the great powers of the Union saw them as children playing at being a real civilization. But humans had something that many species had forgotten. They remembered their debts. They honored their friends. And they never looked away when someone needed help. Taiho stood up and walked to the communication console. He began sending messages to every human ship in the sector. The words were simple but clear. The Valari need us. Earth is sending a fleet. If you can fight, join us. If you cannot fight, help however you can. We do not abandon our friends. One by one, responses came back. Small transport ships, mining vessels, research stations. They were not warships. They were not soldiers. But they were human, and that was enough. The galaxy had abandoned the Valari, but humanity had just declared that they would stand with them, no matter the cost. The blockade around Meridia had been in place for 3 weeks. 12 Union patrol ships formed a ring around the water planet. Their captains were bored but confident. No species had ever defied a council vote. The rules were clear. When the galaxy spoke, everyone listened. Inside the ship's officers played games and complained about the dull assignment. Some felt guilty about what they were doing. The Valari had never hurt anyone. But orders were orders, and the council's word was law. They expected to stay there for months, watching an innocent species slowly starve. They did not expect what came next. Captain Minji Beak stood on the bridge of the horizon's edge, watching the stars blur as the ship traveled through hyperspace. She was a woman of 40 with short black hair and calm eyes. She had commanded this vessel for 6 years, and she knew every sound it made. Today, it hummed with purpose. Around her, 48 other human ships flew in formation. They were not the biggest fleet. They were not the strongest, but they were ready. "Captain," said Lieutenant Doan Shin from his station. He was young, only 25, with nervous energy that he tried hard to hide. "We are approaching the drop point. The blockade is directly ahead." Minji nodded. "Signal all ships. Weapons ready? Shields up. But no one fires unless I give the order." "Understood, Captain." The fleet dropped out of hyperspace like a wave breaking against rocks. One moment, the Union patrol ships were alone. The next moment, they were surrounded by human vessels with weapons aimed at their hulls. Minji opened a channel that broadcast on all frequencies. Her voice was steady and clear. "This is Captain Beak of the Terran Defense Fleet. The Valari are under our protection. Any hostile action against Meridia will be considered an act of war against Earth and her colonies. We suggest you reconsider your positions." Silence followed. On the Union ships, officers stared at their screens in disbelief. The humans had actually come. They were actually challenging the entire Galactic Union. The commander of the blockade fleet was a creature called Vorn. He had served the Council for 60 years, and he had never seen anything like this. His 4 eyes blinked rapidly as he tried to understand what was happening. "Are they serious?" he asked his officers. "Do they not know what this means? The Council will destroy them." His tactical officers studied the human fleet. "Sir, their weapons are armed. Their shields are at full power. They are not bluffing." Vorn thought about his options. He had 12 ships. The humans had nearly 50. His vessels were larger, but humans fought differently. They were unpredictable. They took risks that no reasonable species would take. Stories of human stubbornness had spread across the galaxy. They never surrendered. They never gave up. They would rather die than abandon a cause they believed in. Was this blockade worth dying for? Vorn knew the answer. It was not. Stand down, he ordered quietly. Power down weapons and move away from the planet. His officers obeyed without question. One by one, the patrol ships pulled back. Within an hour, the blockade was gone. The path to Meridia was clear. On the bridge of the horizon's edge, Doan let out a long breath. His hands were shaking, but he smiled. They left. I cannot believe that actually worked. Minji did not smile. She watched the retreating ships with careful eyes. This is only the beginning. The Council will not forgive what we have done today. We have made enemies of the entire galaxy. Was it worth it, Captain? Mingi thought about the question. She thought about her grandfather, who had died during the plague of 2341 before the Valari doctors arrived. She thought about her mother, who had survived because of those same doctors. She thought about what it meant to live in a galaxy where kindness was punished and cruelty was rewarded. Yes, she said finally. It was worth it. The human fleet descended toward Meridia. From orbit, the planet was beautiful. Blue oceans covered most of the surface, broken only by small chains of islands. Beneath those waters, millions of Valari waited in fear and hope. The first human shuttle landed on the largest island. When the doors opened, a group of Valari elders stood waiting. They were thin and tired. 3 weeks of blockade had left them low on supplies, but their eyes widened when they saw the humans step out. Admiral Hannah Yoon had come herself. She walked forward and bowed to the elders in the traditional Valari greeting. We apologize for taking so long, she said simply. We had to gather our fleet. The eldest Valar, a female named Ciri, stared at the admiral with tears in her large dark eyes. You came. When everyone else left, you came. You saved us once. We do not forget. Sfori reached out and took the admiral's hand in her own. Her fingers were cool and smooth, like water given form. The Council will punish you for this. The Keth will want revenge. You have made yourselves targets. Admiral Yoon smiled gently. We are human. We have always been targets, but we have also always survived. Behind them, more shuttles landed. Soldiers and doctors and engineers poured out, carrying supplies and equipment. Human ships began setting up defensive positions in orbit. Within hours, Meridia was no longer alone. Doan walked through the island, helping unload medical supplies. A young Valari child approached him with curious eyes. She had never seen a human before. Are you the ones who came to help? She asked in a small voice. Doan knelt down so he could look at her directly. Yes, we are from Earth. We are your friends. The child smiled and took his hand. It was a small moment, but it meant everything. This was why they had come. Not for glory, not for power, but because it was right above them. The stars shone cold and distant. The galaxy had abandoned the Valari, but humanity had declared that they would stand with them, and the universe would never be the same again. News traveled fast in the galaxy. Within days, every species had heard what the humans had done. The story spread from world to world like fire. A young civilization had defied the Galactic Council. They had broken a blockade with nothing but courage and determination. They had stood against the entire galaxy for a species that was not even their own. The Council was furious. They called emergency sessions and made angry speeches. They demanded that Earth surrender immediately. They threatened sanctions and isolation. Some even spoke of war. The Keth Empire was loudest of all. Their plan to take Meridia had failed. They wanted revenge. But something unexpected was happening in the shadows. On a dying world at the edge of the galaxy, the Norn watched the news with great interest. The Norn were a tall species with pale skin and sad eyes. 50 years ago, their home planet had been destroyed by a natural disaster. They had begged the Council for help, but the Council had said they were too far away. The cost was too high. The Norn were not important enough. Millions of Norn had died waiting for help that never came. The survivors had become refugees, wandering from system to system, never welcome anywhere. The galaxy had forgotten them, but they had not forgotten. The Norn leader, An old male named Tarek gathered his people together. "The humans remember what it means to help others," he said. When everyone else turned away, they stood firm. "Perhaps it is time for us to stand with them." 3 Norran cargo ships set course for Meridia. They were not warships. They carried no weapons, but they carried food and medicine and hope. When they arrived, the humans welcomed them like old friends. The Norran were not the only ones who came. The Helix were a species of insectoid beings. They had 6 legs and compound eyes that saw in all directions at once. They were brilliant engineers who could build anything from nothing. But the Council had always treated them as lesser beings. Their appearance frightened other species. Their culture was seen as strange. For centuries, they had been ignored and insulted. When the Helix Queen heard what the humans had done, she made a decision. She sent her best engineers to Meridia with orders to help rebuild whatever had been damaged during the blockade. The humans did not fear the Helix. They worked beside them as equals. One by one, other species arrived. The Mori, a species of small furry beings who had been driven from their lands by the Kethasolan. Ancient travelers who had been denied a seat on the Council for 1,000 years. The Vex, whose world had been exploited for its resources until nothing remained. These were the forgotten ones, the species that the galaxy had cast aside, and now they had found each other. Ambassador Yuna Choi stood in the great hall of the Valari capital city. It was a beautiful building made of crystal that seemed to grow from the ocean floor. Through the transparent walls, schools of silver fish swam past. Above, the surface of the water shimmered with sunlight. Before her sat representatives of 12 species. Humans sat beside Valari, Norran beside Helix, Mori beside Solan. For the first time in history, the forgotten had gathered together. Yuna was nervous, but she did not show it. She had been a diplomat for 15 years, but she had never faced anything like this. The words she spoke today could change the future of the galaxy. "We did not ask to lead a rebellion," she began, her voice steady. "We simply refused to look away. We saw an injustice, and we could not pretend it did not exist. That is all." She paused, looking around the room. So many different faces, so many different worlds, yet they were all here for the same reason. But if the galaxy sees kindness as weakness, then let them learn what happens when the weak stand together. Alone, we are small. Alone, we are forgotten. But together, we are something new. Something the Council has never seen before. The Valari Elder Suri rose from her seat. Her voice was soft but clear. The humans could have stayed safe on their distant world. They could have followed the Council's orders like everyone else. But they chose to risk everything for us. I have lived for 300 years, and I have never seen such courage. Tarek of the Norran spoke next. "My people have been refugees for 50 years. We lost hope long ago. But today, hope has returned. The humans have shown us that we are not alone." The Helix Queen clicked her mandibles in agreement. "We have been called monsters and beasts. But the humans look at us and see friends. For this, we will build for them. We will fight for them. We will never forget." One by one, each species spoke. They shared their stories of loss and betrayal. They shared their memories of being abandoned by the galaxy. And they shared their gratitude to the humans who had finally seen them. By the end of the night, a new alliance was born. They called it the Coalition of Free Worlds. It was small compared to the Council. It was weak compared to the Keth Empire. But it was united in a way that its enemies could not understand. Commander Taiho Park stood in the back of the hall, watching the historic moment. Beside him was Ji Woo Han, a young communications specialist who had volunteered for the mission. She had tears in her eyes. "Okay, they really came," she whispered. "All of them. We are not alone anymore." Taiho nodded slowly. He thought about his grandmother, who had told him stories of the old days on Earth. Stories of small nations standing against empires. Stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. "We were never alone," he said quietly. "We just had to find each other." Outside the Crystal Hall, the ocean stretched endlessly toward the horizon. Somewhere beyond it, the galaxy waited. The Council was gathering its power. The Keth were planning their revenge. War was coming. But for now, in this moment, there was hope. The Forgotten had found each other, and together they would face whatever came next. Emperor Veth of the Keth Empire sat alone in his dark throne room staring at reports that made his blood boil. His perfect plan had fallen apart. The Valari were supposed to be isolated and helpless. Their world was supposed to belong to him by now. Instead, a coalition was forming around them, and the humans were at its center. He had underestimated the young species. Everyone had. Humans were supposed to be weak and insignificant. They had only been in space for 2 centuries. They controlled just 3 worlds. They should have been easy to ignore, but they were not. They were stubborn and loud and impossibly brave, and now they were turning the forgotten species of the galaxy against him. Veth made his decision. He would not wait for the Council to act. He would not negotiate or threaten. He would simply destroy them all. 300 Keth warships gathered at the edge of the Meridia system. They were massive vessels, each one bristling with weapons. The Keth had built their empire through conquest, and their military was feared across the galaxy. Against the Coalition's 80 ships, victory seemed certain. Admiral Hannah Yoon received the news with a calm face, but her heart was heavy. She had known this day would come. The Keth would not accept defeat. They would come with everything they had. She stood on the bridge of the Sol Dawn, looking at the tactical display. 80 ships against 300. The numbers were impossible. But retreating was not an option. If they ran, the Valari would be slaughtered. The Coalition would die before it truly began. All ships formed defensive positions around the evacuation transports, she ordered. Our priority is protecting the civilians. We hold them here as long as we can. Captain Mingy Beak responded from the horizon's edge. Understood, Admiral. We will give them a fight they never forget. The battle began at dawn. The Keth fleet descended like a storm of fire and metal. Their weapons lit up the darkness of space, sending waves of destruction toward the Coalition defenders. Human cruisers fought beside Norran frigates. Helix drones swarmed around the enemy ships, striking weak points that only their compound eyes could see. Explosions filled the void. Ships burned and died. For every Keth vessel destroyed, the Coalition lost 2. But they held the line. On the surface of Meridia, Sergeant Sun Wukong led a squad of Marines through the flooded streets of the capital city. Debris fell from above as the battle raged in orbit. The water was up to their waists, slowing their movement. Keep moving, Sun Wu shouted over the noise. The shelters are just ahead. Behind him, a group of Valari civilians struggled to keep up. Among them was a young child who could not swim fast enough. Her large, dark eyes were full of terror as explosions shook the world around her. Sun Wu stopped and turned back. Without hesitation, he lifted the child into his arms. I have got you. I am not letting go. The child wrapped her arms around his neck and buried her face against his shoulder. Sun Wu carried her through the chaos, leading the group to safety, one step at a time. In orbit, the situation was growing desperate. The Coalition had lost 30 ships. The Keth kept coming, wave after wave. Admiral Yoon watched her tactical display with grim determination. Then the horizons. Edge took a direct hit. The blast tore through the ship's hull, killing a dozen crew members instantly. Fires broke out on 3 decks. The engines failed. Captain Beak gripped her command chair as the bridge shook violently around her. Damage report, she demanded. Doan's voice came through the speakers, broken by static. Captain, we have lost main power. Weapons are offline. Life support is failing. Can we move? A long pause. We have 1 engine still working. But Captain, we cannot fight anymore. Minji looked at her screen. The evacuation transports were still loading civilians. They needed more time. And a Keth dreadnought was heading straight for them. She made her decision. All crew, abandon ship. Get to the escape pods immediately. Captain, what about you? Someone has to cover the transports. Her voice was calm, almost peaceful. I still have one engine. And one ship. Doan understood. His voice cracked with emotion. Minji, please? Get out of there. Tell my mother I'm sorry I missed her birthday. She smiled sadly. It was an honor serving with all of you. Now go. The crew evacuated as Mingi took manual control of the dying ship. The horizon's edge turned slowly toward the Keth dreadnought. It was the largest ship in the enemy fleet. The command vessel that coordinated their entire attack. She pushed the engine to maximum power. Alarms screamed. The hull groaned. But the ship moved. The Keth commander saw her coming too late. He tried to turn, tried to evade, but the horizon's edge was already upon him. The collision was beautiful and terrible. Two ships became a single ball of fire and light. The dreadnought's reactor exploded, taking 3 nearby vessels with it. The Keth fleet faltered. Their command structure was destroyed. Their coordination failed. Admiral Yoon saw her chance. All ships, full attack. Push them back now. The coalition surged forward with renewed fury. They fought for the captain who had given everything. They fought for the species counting on them. They fought because giving up was not something humans knew how to do. The Keth broke. Their remaining ships turned and fled into hyperspace. The battle was over, but victory tasted like ashes. Duhan sat in an escape pod. Drifting through the debris field that had once been the horizon's edge, he could not speak. He could not cry. He could only stare at the stars and remember his captain's last words. On Meridia. Sun Wukong set the Valari child down in the shelter. She looked up at him with grateful eyes. Thank you, she whispered. Sunwoo nodded, unable to find words. Above them, the battle was ending, but the scars would remain forever. The days after the battle were quiet and sad. The coalition had won, but the cost was terrible. 23 ships had been destroyed. Hundreds of soldiers had died. Captain Mingi Beak was gone forever. They built a memorial on the largest island of Meridia, overlooking the great ocean. It was a simple pillar of white stone with names carved into its surface. At the very top was the name of the captain who had saved them all. Admiral Hannah Yoon stood before the memorial as the sun set over the water. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink. Waves crashed gently against the shore. It was beautiful, and it broke her heart. You deserved more time, she said quietly to the stone. You deserve to see what we will build because of you. A ceremony was held the next day. Representatives from all 12 coalition species gathered on the beach. Doan stood in the front row, wearing his dress uniform. His eyes were red from days of crying, but his back was straight. The Terran Star of Valor was awarded posthumously to Captain Minji Beak. It was the highest honor Earth could give. The medal was placed in a glass case beneath the memorial, where it would stay forever. Suri, the Valari elder, spoke at the ceremony. Her voice was soft but carried across the silent crowd. Captain Beak did not know us. She had never visited our world before the blockade. We were strangers to her, yet she gave her life so that our children could live. Suri paused, looking at the ocean. In 3,000 years, we have never seen such love. We will carry her memory in our hearts until the stars themselves grow cold. But the galaxy was not standing still. News of the battle spread across every system. The story of the human captain who rammed a dreadnought to save refugees touched something deep in beings everywhere. People began asking questions they had never asked before. Why had the council abandoned the Valari on false accusations? Had they let the Keth attack without consequences? Why did the powerful always crush the weak? Protests erupted on a dozen worlds. Citizens demanded answers from their governments. Some called for investigations into the Keth's lies. Others called for their species to leave the council entirely. 3 major species withdrew their membership within a month. They sent messages to the coalition asking to join. More followed in the weeks after. What had started as a desperate alliance of the forgotten was becoming something larger. Ambassador. Unichoi found herself speaking to new representatives every day. The coalition assembly grew from 12 species to 22. They needed a bigger meeting hall. They needed more translators, needed structures and laws and all the things that real governments required. It was exhausting work, but Yuna never complained. Every time she felt tired, she thought about Captain Beak. If that woman could fly a burning ship into an enemy dreadnought, Yuna could certainly sit through another diplomatic meeting. The new coalition assembly met in a great hall built by the Helix on Meridia. It was a marvel of engineering, a dome of living crystal that seemed to breathe with the rhythms of the ocean below. 22 flags hung from the ceiling, representing every member world. Yuna stood at the podium, looking out at the gathered representatives. Humans sat beside Valari. Norin sat beside Helix. Species that had once been strangers now worked together as friends. "We are not here because we sought power," she said, her voice echoing through the hall. "We are here because when darkness fell, we chose to be the light. That is what makes us strong. Not warships or weapons, but the courage to stand for what is right, even when we stand alone." In the front row, Commander Tai-Ho Park sat beside Ji Wuhan and Sergeant Sun Wukong. They had all changed in the months since the blockade. Tai-Ho had gray in his hair now. Ji Wu smiled less, but worked harder. Sun Wu still woke up some nights remembering the sounds of the battle. But they were alive. They were part of something that mattered. Doan was not there. He was on the other side of the galaxy, training the next generation of officers. He had requested the posting himself, said he wanted to teach young pilots about courage and sacrifice. He said Captain Beak would have wanted him to look forward, not back. The Valari High Elder rose from her seat and approached the podium. She was ancient even by Valari standards, with silver patterns across her blue skin. She bowed deeply to Yuna and then turned to face the assembly. "When the galaxy abandoned us, the humans came. When the Keth attacked, the humans fought. When all hope seemed lost, the humans stood firm." Her voice trembled with emotion. "From this day forward, your word is our word, your fight is our fight. We will never forget what you have done for us." The hall erupted in applause. Species that had never agreed on anything before now cheered together. It was a sound that would have seemed impossible just a year ago. On Earth, Admiral Yoon watched the broadcast from her office. She was alone, as she preferred to be these days. The weight of command had grown heavier since the battle. She thought often of the ships she had lost, the lives she had sent into danger. But when she saw the coalition assembly cheering, she allowed herself a small smile. Humanity had been told many things by the older species. They were too young to understand the galaxy. They were too emotional to be trusted. They were too reckless to be taken seriously. Perhaps all of that was true. But sometimes the galaxy needed exactly that. It needed someone foolish enough to stand against impossible odds. It needed someone stubborn enough to refuse when everyone else said to give up. It needed someone who still believed that kindness was strength and that friendship was worth dying for. The humans had shown the galaxy what they were made of, and the galaxy would never forget. Outside the window, the stars shone bright and endless. Somewhere among them, a new future was being born. It would not be easy. There would be more battles, more losses, more tears. But there would also be hope. And hope, as Captain Beak had proved, was the most powerful weapon of all.